Lord, as public servants, we ask that you give us guidance and wisdom to make the decisions that's best for our citizens, Lord. And we ask you be with us all as we work through the next 2 weeks, God, that we make the best decisions for our nation and our state. Be with us where we fail you. Forgive us for our sins. And all these things we ask in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Leader Gooch. That's loud, sorry. All right, first up is House Bill 1058, Representative McDonald. Just come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, this is House Bill 1058 LC 394012. Basically, this is the annual update that we have to do in changing a date for the Motor Carrier Division, the MCCD, in our state. It comes down as a federal mandate. And you see on line 15, basically we're changing January 1st, 2023 to January 1st, 2024. It's something we have to do annually. No worries.
Thank you, Representative. I just want to clarify, you're working off of LC, with what we were talking about. You're working off of LC 394012.
Correct.
And that's as it
Yes,
passed
sir.
the House, no changes, correct?
No, sir.
Great. Is this Chairman Moore with a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question I've had for a long time. What exactly do we get from the federal government by mirroring their regulation? What would prevent us as a state from just coming up with our own motor carrier regulations? Why must we adopt this?
I'm pretty sure I'll let him, the Lieutenant, speak.
If I'm not mistaken, it's because
Could you really quick just tell the committee who you are and
I'm sorry,
for
my
the
name is
record, for those people
Lieutenant,
watching at home as well. Thank
my
you.
name is Lieutenant Vince Mooney. I'm the legislative liaison for the Georgia Department of Public Safety.
Thank you.
The reason we enforce this codification laws is because we receive funding from the federal government for that, and that's why we adopt their regulations.
Do you know how much funding that is? Is it substantial?
I can get back with you offline if possible,
Sure.
and get those numbers to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And they pass annual rules at the federal level, and y'all are, this is just stating that we are following the rules as of the date, January 1st of.
That's correct, sir.
Correct.
And the big question is why we have to do it. Like, why didn't we just pick a year,
Yeah.
5 years out? But you just can't. It's because
Because they keep
their
putting them
changes.
up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great. Senator McLaurin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last thing I want to do is slow you down, and maybe this is a discussion for the future, but I mean, you could write it in a way where you could say whatever regulations are in effect at the beginning of the calendar year. I assume there would be a way to do that, right? I'm asking everybody else.
It would probably take a Yale-trained lawyer to figure that out, which I'm sure you're up for the task. So perhaps next year.
I'm spending all
This
my
could
time
be.
losing on the floor right now, so
Yeah,
I've been
indeed you-
sort of
indeed you are.
distracted. Yeah,
Indeed you are.
Just thought I'd mention it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Senator C. Is that 13?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just asked at the appropriate time to do pass.
All right, I'll recognize that as a motion do pass. Senator from Chairman Ginn. All those, any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Are you for it? You for it, Senator? All right, let's see those hands so I can get a count here. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, guys. And you may want to stay right there. And Representative McDonald, you can do the same because next up is House Bill 1193.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you again. This is House Bill 1193, LC 394183. This is also brought to me by the Department of Public Safety. The main part of this bill is for 40 plus years, we've been issuing permits for red lights, blue lights, and amber lights. And of course, it's always been a $2 fee that you You send in your application, you send in your $2, and they send you your sticker if they approve what you want your sticker for, whether it's wreckers, any type of vehicles out on the state highway. By 2024 now, it's costing about $5.25 to process this, make the sticker, and then send it back but through mail to the applicant. So they're wanting to do away with just the amber light permit. You'll see in this section that they cleaned up a few things because with technology, not only flashing lights, they do have LED revolving lights. So you'll see that through the bill on line 12, line 26. To get to the main part of the bill, you'll see from line 75 to lines 118, by doing away with this amber light permit, they're codifying in this bill who has to have an amber light. Looking back at 69 through 74, if you remember, in law, we were requiring low-speed vehicles to have these amber lights. Now they want to leave it up to the local jurisdictions to regulate, whether it's golf carts going up and down the road, whether they want to require that or not, and the orange triangle. So they're taking that out of this piece of legislation. So again, line 75 through 118 is saying who the state is going to require to have these permits as people are bringing product, escorting product through the state of Georgia or wreckers, and it's pretty clear throughout this entire bill. Lines 124 through 128 talk about the punishment if you do not have the amber light on these, which is first, a violation of code section will be punished by a misdemeanor, provided, however, the violation of this code during the commission of a felony will be punished as a felony. So that's the key, a big key change in this. But it does not affect anybody if they turn on their flashing brake lights, when they're on the side of the road, or even they're in a compromised situation driving down the road. And that's the part of the bill that addresses, and I'll stand for any questions.
Can you walk me through ironically, there's a lot of flashing red lights on my screen here, and I'll get to those in a second. But can you walk me through what this changes, if anything, for the red light permit? Does it just kind of go away?
It does
as well?
not. They're
Okay.
keeping the red light and the blue light for volunteer firemen and those that do some side work. We
And
talked
that's still
about
$2,
Sir?
Is that still $2?
It's still
Is
going
that
to be
correct?
$2, yes, sir.
Okay.
But they do want to monitor, because when you have the red and blue, you're asking people to yield to you going down the road in an emergency situation. The public safety wants to still monitor who has those, so nobody's out impersonating a fireman or a police officer.
Great, that makes sense. We'll start with Senator Lucas.
It's a representative.
Yes, sir.
Normally, funeral processions have the amber light, the lead car, and then you have law enforcement behind it. Has anybody that you been leading in the funeral complained about it?
Not that's in the back, no, sir. No complaints by the rider in the back of the car.
All right. I'm just checking to see if you're handling your business.
No, sir. I ask, and nobody's complained yet, sir.
Leader Gooch, is your light on over there?
I had a question or two for the former volunteer fireman. You still a fireman?
No, sir. 27 years.
What's the difference between an amber light color and a yellow light color?
It's you can see that on lines.
Is there a difference?
There isn't, but they called it yellow and amber on lines 26 because it's kind of the determination of the officer, because some may be a little lighter amber, which may look yellow to some people, just like purple and blue. You can get those confused in an LED situation. So they wanted to have both there, yellow and amber.
So will we be able to use the amber strobes
Yes,
without
sir.
a permit?
Yes, sir. Well, you can use that. Like I keep one in my car. A few weeks ago, I was driving from Port Royal back to my home, and a guy hit one of the bridges, and his boat came off his trailer. I reached in my back of my car where I kept it, and I put the amber light on the back of his boat that's sitting in the middle, waiting on law enforcement to get there, because it was just sitting right in the middle of 369. So just trying to do the best I could to ward off anything that happened to somebody hit that boat. So I keep one in my car.
Okay.
No, sir, I stayed there till law enforcement got there.
Can you tell me what the purpose of the green flashing light is?
That's a command when in an emergency situation. So when you see a green light up in the air, that's the command center that if you want to go out and get that's the information of what's going on in the situation, go to the green light.
You're the man. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader Gooch. Next up, Chairman Moore. Recognize you for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where can you point to where it gets rid of the fee for the yellow and amber lights in the bill?
I don't think it's talking about the fee specifically, because we're now just showing that what's required to have it. We're doing away with the requirement for it being having to go get the permit.
Okay, so if you're required to have it, you don't need a permit, you just need to put it on there by law?
Correct.
Okay. But if I don't have one of those needs to have it by law, then I still need to go get a permit?
No,
Sure.
they're
Okay.
doing away with the whole amber light permit.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Mello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my good friend, Representative McDonald from the House, any reason why you just only specified the lead vehicle instead of lead vehicle or hearse? As you know, my family's in the funeral business as well, and sometimes we have processions with a lead vehicle, and sometimes the hearse becomes a lead vehicle, but sometimes they're not, sometimes interchangeable.
This is something we talked about. There was a piece of legislation in the House that dealt with lead vehicles. I think Representative Lehman Franklin carried it, and it was describing that all funeral processions should have that lead vehicle should have some type of flashing light. Preferably, I think they could be white, also clear/white.
Thank you, Representative.
Any other questions? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? Motion do pass from my Vice Chair Dixon. We have a second from Chairman Ginn. Any discussion?
I just keep purple lights in my car.
You got those purple lights? Well, I've got a sign up here from somebody with Park Vent. It looks like it's Thad, and there's no bill number on here. I just want to clarify. Which bill did you want to speak to?
I was going to speak to the e-bike rebate bill.
Which bill number?
I had not called the number actually.
Can you say it again? I couldn't understand that.
I had not called the number for that bill actually, so I was just subject matter.
What's the subject matter?
Subject matter was for the e-bike rebates. That was gonna be
E-bike rebates. I don't.
That had passed and will be installed on their part.
We don't have that bill on our agenda today that I'm familiar with. So, and in fact, I'm not even familiar what bill you're referencing. So, if I'm missing something, please let me know. But it's not about this bill. So make sure that you had your opportunity to speak if you wanted to. All right, we have a motion and a second, which I was a little bit out of order on calling for him. But any discussion on this? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. See you in rules. Yes, sir. Yes.
The gentleman that's talking about the e-bike rebates, I believe that's a City of Atlanta issue. You may be at the wrong building. That may be at City Hall.
Oh, no, sorry, I was just looking.
Yeah, I think your meeting's over across the street at City Hall. Lady behind you there works for the mayor. She might be able to clarify.
Thank you, Leader Gooch, for that clarification. All right. Is Representative McCollum here? He is. All right. Next up is House Bill 516. This is the bill. This is the bill that started. We'll let Representative McCollum talk about the main purpose of the bill. Then I want to let you guys know, I'll just give you a highlight on where we stand on the kiosks. That was a conversation that we had. Chairman Jaspers and I worked on this through the weekend with Jenna, and where this landed is we took out any reference as to directionality, given the, what I heard at least is the will of the committee. So the department, GDOT, in the process of permitting this will have discretion at which way these face. So that's you won't see that. It's just kind of, the bill's silent on that at this point, but from lines 100 to 107, you'll see that essentially we give GDOT the permitting authority, which will also give them the ability to speak to directionality. And then one thing that we added on line 42, we had talked about the sunset in the last committee. We did put that in so that no other kiosk shall be permitted after July 1st of 2026. The other thing that we added in here after some discussion is that we're going to cap this on state roads at 30 kiosks total. So that ensures that over the next year and a half, these don't pop up with such such volume, I guess, that we won't be able to revisit this, and we can have it capped at 30 on state roads. And if there's anything that we need to address, we can do that as we kind of see how this is going. So with that, Representative, anything you'd like to add? And I know Josh Waller with GDOT as well is here to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for having me here in the upper chamber, as Senator from the 45th tells me all the time. So do you want me to go back through the bill again? As far as it's chock full of great things, I know. So what's your pleasure?
I don't think we need to go through it since we've already been through it again. I guess,
Okay.
Josh, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just here for questions.
Sure. Any questions from the committee on changes that we made? Representative Lucas, or sorry, Senator Lucas.
Is there any major change that deals with
Senator, can you grab microphone 2? Your microphone's not turning on for me. Thank you.
Is there any major change that deals with DOT and contracting and bids in this bill?
The only thing that's updated in this is the limit on quick response projects goes from 200 to 500 to account for the inflationary impact of the last 10 years. That's the only thing, but it doesn't change the process. It just changes the contract threshold.
Why is that advantageous to y'all? Help the committee understand what the reason is for that change.
So that program's administered out of our field districts, and those are those turn lane projects, right turn lane, left turn lane, other type of intersection improvements that they can go in there and do an expedited process where they secure 3 bids. You get in there, they get the turn lane installed, and you can see some quick turnaround and improvement in traffic movement. So it's a very popular program in the district. So I know a lot of y'all's districts have been touched by that, and it's administered out of our field district offices.
Thank you. All right, Senator McLaurin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So we have an update on the wayfinding kiosks directionality issue, I guess, and what it appears to be the case, tell me if I'm wrong, is that there's a prohibition on the multimedia screen, whatever the screen is, being viewable by drivers. Is that functionally picking
You want to point the
parallel-
committee to your line just so that everybody can
Yeah,
follow with you?
right. So that's, I think we're looking at 119 and 120, that the wayfinding kiosk has to be positioned in such a manner that any digital touchscreen or multiple media display is not viewable to motor vehicles traveling upon the nearest roadway, which I understand to be Chairman Jaspers' concern from the last committee meeting we had, which I think means that they're functionally forced to be perpendicular as opposed to parallel. And I'm wondering if that was the choice that was made, and if to be totally honest with you, I found out one time pilots for the Air Force have to pass a test, which is like a spatial reasoning test. I would have failed that test miserably. So I need a little help in making very clear what we're doing on the parallel versus perpendicular question.
Yeah, I think that may have been a miss in drafting that change, that this would still speak to, and technically, even if it was parallel, you could still turn your head and see it.
Yeah.
So I would advise that we strike that when we get to the appropriate time.
Okay, great.
Those-
Well, then I'm
those two
glad I
items.
was helpful,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, what's the pleasure of the committee? Motion do pass from Vice Chair Dixon, second from Chairman Beach. Any discussion? Recognize Senator McLaurin for an amendment.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we strike lines 119, 120, and renumber the subparagraphs accordingly.
All right, we have a motion for an amendment to strike 119 and 120 and renumber D and E accordingly. We have a second from Senator Mallow.
Are we striking 119, which is the light intensity, or are we striking 16 through 18?
No, we're striking. You may have a different.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'll just read this so
Apologize.
that everybody, what 119 says is be positioned in such a manner that any digital touchscreen or multimedia display is not viewable to motor vehicles traveling upon the nearest roadway, which I think honestly functionally would not allow these.
Right.
So I think it's best to get rid of that. And if we have a motion and a second on, for an amendment to strike 119 and 120. Second is from Senator Mallow. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by raising your hand. Is that an alligator arm? Yes. No. That's a yes. That's a okay. Perfect. That's the Schaefer. I don't know what you're referencing, but fair enough. That motion carries unanimously. We're now on to a motion do pass as amended on LC. It's a committee sub LC 394382S. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. That's a little better. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in favor. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. 1, motion carries 10-1. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for coming back. Josh, thanks for your work on this over the weekend as well with us as we sorted through this. All right. Last but certainly not least, we have a 10-minute presentation from Amber Clark, the Airport Association. Okay, you're good. Good to do it. All right, thank you, Amber. Who do you have with you today?
This is Andrew Wiersma. He is our past president for the Georgia Airports Association and currently our legislative committee president.
Great. And I'm sure that you're here, among other things, to thank the Senate for their significant support of airports in the baby budget. The House members have left. Actually, there's a House member there sneaking out before we can acknowledge the fact that I believe the Senate tripled the state's investment into airports from what the House sent over. Is that accurate?
It is, actually. It's in my next slide. So.
Fantastic. Can we just start with that slide?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little
Great.
breakdown there.
Do you have on that slide what the House did versus what the Senate did for airports?
Yes, I believe the House was $53.3 million and the Senate was $71.
Amazing. And then the final figure
Was $124 million.
And the Senate, I believe, was instrumental in getting that number in the baby budget to be what it was as well. So on behalf of the Senate and the great people we represent, you're welcome. And we certainly would partner with the House next year should they choose to support the important airports and infrastructure we have in the state as much as the Senate did. So
absolutely.
With that, thank you for being here today. We'll see you next time.
All right.
Oh, do you have something else?
I did.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
Because
go
it
ahead.
doesn't stop at money. We do have some other things that we'd like to bring.
Okay. We'll let you do that.
Well, I do want to introduce us as first. We are the Georgia Airport Association, and we were founded back in '90. We actually do represent all airports in Georgia, so that would be general aviation as well as commercial. And we are dedicated to the development and growth of our Georgia airports. And why is it important that we support all Georgia airports is because we work as a system, and we promote regional, state, and national economies through that system. So most of you probably already know this, but we do have 103 publicly owned airports that are supported by the state, and 71% of those airports are actually GAA members, so Georgia Airport Association members. All 100% of the commercial airports are also members, and 68% of our general aviation airports are also members. And there's some information about visitors. We have 1.4 million visitors to the state. And obviously the big number is $73 billion of economic impact to our state. And in this very room, this committee actually represents 23 airports, and it's 3 commercial and 20 general aviation, and combined together, it's $3.2 billion annual economic impact to our state. So thank you for representing those airports. And
Can I
this
ask
is,
you to highlight something just for a second, if you will? I think if I'm a casual observer watching this back home, and I have never been to an FBO or only use Hartsfield,
Sure.
flying out of Atlanta, or maybe flying to Brunswick or Savannah, I might wonder how this impacts me as a average citizen. And of course, there is tremendous impact around the state because of the airports. Can you, even if it's not a place that you fly in and out of, can you help the committee and people watching home understand why having airports that are accessible in this manner across the state is important to the state?
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. So general aviation is very, very important. We have all sorts of activity that's other than getting on a commercial flight. We have things such as life flights. Specifically at my airport, we have, transplants that need to happen after hours. If you didn't have an airport that was local to your community, your hospital may not be able to help in that situation. We have flight training. All the pilots that we have that are going up through the airlines need somewhere to begin to train. We also have agricultural needs, and so these airports support that as well, and just small businesses. So it's extremely important to have the growth of airports amongst the whole state and be able to be across the whole state because it supports all the economy in that way. You're welcome. So this is kind of just a breakdown of some of the requests for last year and the projects for infrastructure for airports. And as we can see, we have the 124 million for this year's fiscal 24, and you can kind of see here where we line up to other states, and so we're getting closer. I think the biggest thing that we wanted to say first, obviously, was thank you. You heard us. We've been coming and asking for more funding, letting you know how important it is to keep this infrastructure up, to support all those things I just mentioned. And so we really do appreciate it, that this is going to be something that's going to need to continue. Infrastructure is going to continue to be maintained. It is very expensive to maintain runways, taxiways, perimeter fences, making sure obstacles are free of your airport. And so this funding is going to need to continue at a higher level. So we appreciate that, but wanted to make sure that was spoken.
Do you know what's happening in North Carolina that is having them with such a large expense compared to really anybody else on the list?
So just to, I'm sorry, go back. It's not the expense. I think that they are investing more in the infrastructure. So we don't have the specific breakdown of their projects, but I can assume that it's probably similar to what ours would be. But that's actually how much they're funding their airports.
Okay.
Okay. And so the two big things that we kind of want to talk about are hangars. And, we've had these conversations. We've had some of you fly around with us to actually go and visit some airports. And there is currently a hangar study being conducted, and we hope that comes out very, very shortly. But we wanted to discuss, as it's maybe considering a loan program, and we are very appreciative of that. There may be some obstacles still for some smaller airports. And so as that is being considered, if we can look at the possibility of having a sliding scale or taking into consideration some smaller communities that may have difficulties getting a local match. And so we wanted to just bring that to the attention. It does take about 2 years from the initiation, design to construction. So that is a challenge that we will all face as we go through a loan program. Some communities, like I said, may have difficulty repaying those loans. It is a large amount to build a hangar, and even at a low interest rate, it may take a while to do that. So for some of those that are really, really small, we may want to consider maybe a grant or like a 50-50 grant loan program, and we can kind of give some more feedback. We actually just put out a survey to our members, and they're giving us some information as to whether they might be able to do a low interest loan or a 50-50, and just kind of what their needs and abilities are.
So I see your last line there, which kind of gets to my inherent question when I hear you say all of that. And my question is, why don't people just rent these things and there's not a viable business option to construct them and then lease them out? When you say the current average hangar prices would more than double, what is a current average hangar price?
Well, we'll see the final report for the GDOT study that will tell us, but I think on average what they're saying is about $200 a month.
Okay. Yeah. So if it would, let's just call it $500 a month for even if someone's at I see a couple of props in there. I know that obviously jets are in these as well. I'd be interested to see the study, see how we compare it to other states, because to me, that's probably the cheapest expense, even at $500 a month, of owning an airplane.
Absolutely.
And so I would just say, for me, before we start talking about government subsidies here, I certainly would like to see that expense borne by the people that own the planes.
Absolutely.
Senator McLaurin. Sorry,
that's me.
Chairman again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the hangars, and this is where, for me, I look at them, and I've talked to a lot of airports out my way. most everybody that wants a hangar would be glad to build one on the airport grounds and do a long-term lease. Basically, build the hangar and give it to the airport after something like 20 years. And just, hey, here's what we want to do. Why does that model not work more often? Because I've struggled with it. I've got a lot of airports that have plenty of room. It's not like at PDK I can understand, hey, we're out of space to build. There's not many, the problem there. But these airports are in rural parts of the state, and why is that model not working to build all those hangars that we need built?
So I think for some of those airports, they don't have private investors that are willing to put that money in. I think sometimes it's also hard for a private investor to get a loan for that period of time, and they're not owning the actual property. They're ground leasing from the airport, so I think there might be some hesitation there. And some community, if you have to think about airports as well, not all of them are operated in the same fashion. Not all are ran by a city or by a county. Some have a private authority. And so they're not getting some of the help from the cities and counties to subsidize the build.
A private authority or a different airport authority?
A separate airport authority, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and in that case, we had one in the county where I was county manager and worked very well, and it's difficult to understand the concept.
Yeah, and I think it is still doable. I think we just have to consider that if the whole state is charging a lower rate, that might be a challenge that we all have to overcome. How do we all have to increase our rates about the same time? Because then you have some airports that are still charging that lower rate, and it's hard to get them to go to one that has now newly built hangars with like a larger rate. So we just may have to take that into consideration.
Mr. Chairman, that would be collusion. I wouldn't suggest it. I think the realtors found that out.
I'm going to recognize Senator Mello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question. I was reading an article a while back where development authorities to lure companies are abating the taxes on jets for that business and entity to stay in their community. Can you speak to state-supported hangars, paying for that, authorities abating the taxes? So how would the ad valorem taxes be a benefit if the development authority would just abate them?
That's a good point. Some communities, I do think, give back some of the ad valorem tax to the airports. In my case, we don't get ad valorem taxes from the city. They do directly go to the city and they use them. So I think that's a variation. It just depends on the ownership of the airport and what the agreement is with the city.
But to be clear, nothing stops the development authority from abating the taxes on a jet to keep it at a certain airport within their community. And so there would be no taxes generated because the authority would have abated those taxes. Vis-a-vis, we would have also subsidized the building of hangars with no taxes coming in at all. So this would be a purely subsidized government project.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with a city doing that, so I can't speak on that. Maybe Andrew? Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is airport authorities that stand alone from a government can not charge ad valorem tax. And some communities have looked at that. There's relatively few airports that are in that scenario. I know I'm right up on the Tennessee border, and Bob Shaw keeps his airplane in Chattanooga because he doesn't have any ad valorem tax in Tennessee. So that keeps his jet out of our airport because he's saving ad valorem tax. So there's certain communities that it may benefit them to get the jet on the airfield where you can get the activity and you're selling them fuel where you wouldn't have gotten that ad valorem tax anyway. And that may only be states that are sort of on the border, but that's the way it works at mine, if that helps.
Thank you. I think you've got one more slide here, right?
I do. And the other thing that we are bringing is Senate Bill 326. It dropped, and we just wanted to start a discussion about height restriction. So currently, height restriction is left up to the local government, local authorities, and we are one of only 3 states that doesn't have a statewide legislation on height restrictions. And so we, of course, want to protect our airports. We do have new technologies that are popping up, cell phone towers, all sorts of different things. And so we want to make sure that we have some good regulation to protect our airports and some guidance for our communities to use and make sure that we're considering that as well.
When you speak of what height is it that you're referring to?
So when the height, all the airspace that is around the airport when an aircraft takes off, protecting that airspace around the airport is referred to as Part 77 surfaces.
Great.
Yeah.
Any discussion or questions from members of the committee? Chairman Burns, 3.
Just for edification,
Sure.
current height restrictions around our airports are set by local communities, is that correct?
That is correct.
And then what is the variance of that? Can you give me some idea of the variance of what locals choose to put restrictions on their airspace?
What we're kind of seeing is that sometimes the community, the airports and their local governments are not communicating well, and they may put something up in a space where there is not guidance, like a hotel might be put close to a runway protection zone. And so we are looking to have some good regulation to fall back on, so when those situations happen, we have a higher level of restriction to show what needs to be protected on those particular airports.
And your Senate Bill 326 would provide some of that guidance?
Yes.
Thank you.
It will, and we also are conducting a study. We are soliciting a proposal right now so that we can bring more information to you all to help in aid development of this bill.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you,
very
Mr. Chairman.
welcome.
Thank you. Recognize Chairman Moore. Did you have your button pressed?
No, it's-
Okay. Oh, sorry, Leader Gooch, my
Yeah,
apologies.
just following up on your conversation about height restrictions, I think what we're seeing around the state, especially in my district, the FAA comes in and does a study on their, glide paths. And what they're seeing is as trees continue to grow, you're seeing problems with restrictions, and so they're moving the thresholds in, shortening literally the effectiveness of the runway for takeoffs and landings. So up in Blairsville, for example, we've lost probably the majority of the corporate jets that were coming in and out to get fuel and bringing people in for the Brasstown Valley Resort. So air traffic has dropped tremendously because the FAA has come in and put further restrictions on that airstrip. So to fix that, we have to go out onto private property and negotiate with landowners to either cut trees down or top them, and even put in lights on barns and buildings that could be a potential hazard. So it's more expensive to do it after the development takes place, and if you go ahead and put those restrictions in place early. So local governments should be a partner in this, and they are in a lot of situations, but they don't want to have to condemn property, and that's what ultimately you would have to do if the property owner doesn't comply.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Chairman again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you telling me currently there's no FAA requirements for putting up a cell tower or water tank or anything like that around an airport?
So there are FAA regulations, but they do not actually have the enforcement piece for local governments. So they have recommendations, kind of like what he was talking about. They can make a determination that something is a factor, but they don't actually stop the build. And so what they'll do is just impose restrictions on the airport itself. And so to prevent that from happening, we're looking for this bill to kind of help give the teeth to that, to make sure that it's being regulated before it happens.
The question I would have was when you look at let's just say we put up a cell tower somewhere, you're going to put restrictions. That mean they just got to funnel their traffic a different part of the airport, a different pattern? Is that what you would be doing if you stick one tower up? That's all they're going to, FAA is going to do is say, hey, you got to come in this way or that other direction.
They could, or they could say they could drop the altitude, and then that could cause certain aircraft to not be able to fly into the airport at all. So it just depends on the situation, but it can limit to what kind of aircraft are available to come in based on those height restrictions that are in place because of that obstacle.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right. I don't see any other questions. Thank you all for being here
Thank you
today.
so
We
much.
definitely appreciate the work that you do. Look forward to the continued conversation around these topics and appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, unless something changes between now and Friday, this will be our last committee meeting of this biennial. So thank you all for your hard work, and this meeting is adjourned.